Welcome to the next edition of Historical Reflections with Jim Hern. My name is Paul Thomas, and I'm hosting this discussion on the election of 1876. The Allied victory, which ended World War II, was complete. Even today, we still have American troops stationed at military bases in Germany and Japan, two countries whose economic power is surpassed only by the US and China. Looking at the former Confederate states, this is what we were getting into, previous question, of Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, and South Carolina, today they rank in the top 10 in poverty, joining Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The military defeats of Japan and Germany produced a national realization of how wrong their racist and predatory policies were. And because of that realization, it helped produce the economic powerhouses they ultimately became. The Deep South never experienced that complete defeat because 1876 prevented its completion. Looking at those economies now, is there a legitimate argument that Hayes' order to end Reconstruction is the main contributing factor to their current economic circumstance? Okay, I laid it out. Go for it.
All right. Two different perspectives on this. If you're talking about was the South defeated in the war, absolutely. Crushed, no money, no resources, nothing. From that perspective, they took a particular route to try and come back or at least control things. That perspective has lasted through today, continues to last through today.
Okay, hold on. So you're saying that the military defeat of the South in 1865 is contributing to their economic woes of today?
No, I was arguing the fact that they lost the war. That's one perspective. The other perspective is basically yours, that says that they used at best or at worst used the war to get where they are now. Let's talk about let's talk about poverty in the South.
That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that they never fully accepted the defeat, which meant that the blacks had equal footing in their society. And by never accepting that defeat, they created a society where there was impoverishment, both among the black population and among the poor whites.
I agree.
And therefore have what they had now, which is, six of the 10 former Confederate states are experiencing lowest poverty rates in the nation, because they refuse to accept the fact that having a strong black middle class will help everybody. That's what I'm saying.
All right, let me add to your view of the South from the standpoint of the poverty that exists in the South today. Here's some numbers for you. You said this. Deep South has the largest percentage of people living in poverty in the United States. You know what the minimum wage is in Mississippi?
No.
$7.12.
Okay.
You know what the minimum wage in Mississippi is for workers who get tipped? $2.16. Okay. There are no minimum wages in the southern states. So we go with the federal minimum wage.
Of $7.50.
$7.12. The Deep South, and here's where we go from who's controlling the Deep South. The Deep South has the lowest per capita spending by state government of any of the states. They don't spend any money on the people in the Deep South. The Deep South refuses to help low-income households get access to health care, Obamacare in particular.
The Medicaid expansion. They refuse the Medicaid expansion.
Exactly. As a result, the Deep South has the highest rate of obesity, smoking, and teenage birth rates. A consequence of that poverty is that poor and struggling people in the Deep South go to and support the church more than any other area of the United States. They also have the highest level of gun violence in the United States. 9 out of the 10 top ones. I gotta say this: the only other one that is in the top 10 as far as gun violence is concerned is Alaska. So we look at it. They don't allow unions. All of the things that they have been has been forced upon them for this last 130 years comes down to this. For all of these statistics, for all of these numbers, for all of these things that are not simply not fair, people vote in the South for the party of Jesus and the party that supports guns. That's the demographics of the way the vote continues to work in the South.
I want to add something to that.
Okay.
They also vote to promote their race. They also they vote to promote their race by passing policies that keep the other, when I say other, I mean blacks, Hispanics, Mexicans, natives down. That's another reason why it's so tough to live in the South.
But they're getting enough of a vote to absolutely be in control in the South, and until that changes, till something there fundamentally changes, they're going to work for $2.12 an hour. They're going to let the state legislatures get away with not spending any money. They're not going to have health care. Those are the policies of in the red states that are created by the whites and leaving everybody else blue. So there you go, red, white, and blue.
Yeah, can't argue with that. One of the legislative results of the mess observed in 1876 presidential election was the Electoral Count Act of 1887. Heavily criticized for its vague language, it clearly showed in 2000 and 2016 how awful presidents who are not popularly elected can screw things up royally. Can you shed some light on how the Electoral Count Act of 1887 was constructed politically? Now, we've had some talks, you and I, text messages, about the Electoral Count Reform Act that was just passed, attached to an omnibus bill, just this current Congress, I guess the previous Congress. And I did a little bit of research on that, but I don't want to talk about that until I hear what you have to say about the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and the Electoral Count Reform Act that was just passed.
The electoral count vote after the election. Remember, I was talking about the media and how the media was controlling the vote with things that were, as they still do, that are more spectacular than true. And the media jumped all over this election. It was not a well-kept secret that there was a compromise, although the details didn't come out for a number of years. They knew they had to do something. The Electoral Vote Act
because the people felt it was a corrupt election, right?
That's because it was a corrupt election.
Yeah, well, because the people felt it was, and the fact it was, those two things coincide.
Right. I mean, what I was saying before, they threw the entire vote of Louisiana out. One state had a Republican governor; he got the vote. South Carolina had a commission vote, the legislature vote. So they had to do something because the federal government is not involved in the electoral vote or the popular vote for the most part. They had to do something to try and make it, at the face of it, to try and make it so that everything was a little bit the same for ensuing elections. That didn't necessarily mean anything because there are ways to work around all of that. The electoral vote count of that time was somewhat ambiguous, and necessarily so. It's the argument that the Constitution absolutely needs to be vague so that it can be interpreted. Every time it seems to be interpreted, it's interpreted by the crooks or by the bad guys, and they take advantage of everything they can possibly take advantage of. But that's what that was, as an attempt to do that. The new one is not 100% the answer either, but they're trying to tighten down some of the rules of how the electoral vote can be made. Remember, back in 1876, the people that there were states that had two electoral ballots, and so that went to the legislature of the state, who then would take it to the governor or whatever their particular act was, with the threat that if they couldn't come to a conclusion, it would go to the federal government, and that meant that whoever the ruling party was in the federal government would have simply summarily ruled in their favor. So we could do a whole hour on the Electoral College if you want. I don't want to.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I just want it to be gone. That's all I want.
Well, I want to take one shot here, and that is the purpose of the Electoral College is so that one state can't rule the election. If it's simply a popular vote and everybody in California voted for somebody, and half of everybody else in the country, or 52% of the rest of the country voted for the other candidate, the state of California would rule and they would win the election.
That's not. I mean, that's a ridiculous example, because you're not going to get everybody in the state of California.
Not what I'm pointing out. I'm pointing out that the Electoral College was invented to keep specific influences from dominating the election. That's what it was. Is it a perfect system? It's better than simply counting the popular vote.
Well, I totally disagree. The Electoral College gave us George W. Bush. Okay. The Electoral College gave us Donald Trump. Those two elections were not won by the people. Most of the Americans did not want those two people to become president. Yet they became president, and look what happened. For crying out loud, that war in Iraq was ridiculous. It was based on lies, and they convinced enough people to go along with it. They even had Hillary Clinton voting for it, the military resolution. And then you had Donald Trump, who did everything he could to cheat and win that election. And it was the Electoral College in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan that gave that man the presidency. And look what we have to deal with now. If we had the popular vote, we wouldn't have as many. And here's another thing. You spend all this time in these swing states. There's not going to be any campaigning in California. There's not going to be any campaigning in Texas. The campaigning is going to occur in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and Georgia. So why should those states get all the money that the media pours into it, and the other states are ignored because they're swing states? And swing states is not democratic.
If you've been alive during the Andrew Jackson administration, you might have gone in a different direction here. There are a number of presidents before the Civil War who were elected by popular vote, who were tools of the South. So the point is, is there any election that is purely going to provide a winner who's going to do their best and be the best person they can be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4
It's
years.
not going to be a perfect system, but it's going to be better than this electoral college system. It's a bad system, and I'm not going to agree with anybody that thinks it's a better system than the popular vote. So we'll disagree on that.
I've been dying to do this. When we compare 1876 to today, there's a great thing that happened when Hayes won the election, and the Democrats were morally indignatious. There was a letter written from a Democratic House member to Tilden, and remember, Tilden got in the election because he was the prosecutor that busted the Tweed ring, so he was there to to drain the swamp. This letter, very short letter, says, "My dear sir, enter suit at once against Rutherford B. Hayes in the name and in behalf of the people of the United States, forbidding him the exercise of that office, and keep him in court the whole of the next 4 years, and you will save your country. Serve the writ on him if he takes the oath on Sunday, the first thing on Monday. If he waits till Monday to take the oath, serve the moment after he makes his inaugural speech." That sounds to me an awful lot like some of the things we're hearing on a day-to-day basis today. My whole point is there's some phenomenal similarities in history, and the political history of the United States is full of these sorts of things. And as you know, my point is I consider myself to be apolitical.
Well, history repeating itself is certainly the case, because we had the Nazi Germany that occurred in the 1920s and the 1930s, and the American MAGA movement of the 2020s have eerie similarities. So we'll leave it at that. Jim, thanks so much. Next time, we want to talk about Brown versus Board of Education and the Dred Scott decision. So all you out there in Cyberland, thanks for listening. And for Jim Hern and the Historical Reflections, we'll see you next time. Bye now.
Go Brewers!